It's hard because it's sad because you homeless, like you have nowhere to go, you know what I'm saying, working, then I have no daycare. So that's actually a struggle. Then trying to do girls' hair, that's out of my field, so I'm trying, you know. My top 3 things to get me out of the shelter is finding daycare is number 1, getting a job, in a house or apartment. Daycare is kind of scary for me because if you watch the news, you'll see kids getting beat or getting mistreated or not being treated right. And that scares me because I love my daughter and I don't want to be another victim of someone else's kid getting mistreated. I just moved out here. I have no car at the moment. So I don't know where nothing is at this moment. So I'm just basically looking on my phone, looking around, trying to do this, trying to get things in place. I've been out here for about 2 months and it's very hard. Getting around in the city, being mobile, don't have no car. If it's raining outside, you know what I'm saying? But if I didn't have my daughter out here, it would be more easier, but it's not nobody's job besides me to get that done.
It's not uncommon to hear people who have never experienced genuine homelessness to say something like, why don't these people do what the rest of us do? Get a job, find a place, solve your problem. People who've never experienced homelessness don't understand that homelessness is a hole that's much harder to get out of than it is to get into, which is why preventing homelessness is so much cheaper than solving homelessness. And families working to get back to some form of stability face obstacles that you and I don't.
The obstacles I see most are is employment issues, childcare issues. A mom wants to work and she's got small kids, and when she looks at the cost of childcare and even what's supplied, she can't do it or he can't do it, or it doesn't work for their hours that they're employed for. Another part of that would be transportation. If the person has no vehicle to get from point A to point B and they're having to use the bus, a drive or a trip to work, to childcare and home in a car might take them 15 minutes, but if you're on the bus, it could take you an hour, hour and a half. And then when you add inclement, bad weather, it makes it worse. So transportation is a big issue, and it's not always something you can easily solve with a bus.
There's always going to be barriers in terms of the basic needs not being met, even though people will assume that there are food pantries, there are places to get formula, there are places to get diapers, there are places to get clothing, but there's still moms and dads that come into the shelter who say, my children has been walking around for the past 4 days without shoes because they lost one of their shoes, or I'm out of formula now. And even though there is WIC, but there still is kind of a disconnect there. They have to get to WIC. Or if they're not used to being in Spokane and they're not used to that resource, they're still kind of navigating that. So there really is a transitional period of figuring out where the resources are and how to utilize the resources that are here. And yeah, that still goes on today, even for basic needs.
In his book, The Ghetto, the Garden, and the Gospel, about poverty in America, Joe Ader explains some of the obstacles families experiencing homelessness face, using an illustration he calls the needs ladder.
The needs ladder is just a way of visualizing if somebody starts from the bottom, if they are just basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, basic needs are the bottom of the needs ladder. The top of the needs ladder are things like permanent housing, living wage income, so that you can get to stable ground. The gap between basic needs and that top level is actually like 19 rungs on a ladder. And we have this idea in our community that, oh, all you got to do is give somebody some food, get them a job, and then they're going to be stable. And that's not the case. There is emotional needs, there's physical needs, there's education needs, there's health needs, but there's also identification, transportation, So if you don't have an ID, you can't get a job, right? And if you don't have your identification, well, then you need your Social Security card to get your identification. Well, what if you don't have that? Well, then you need your birth certificate to get that. And who's carrying around their birth certificate with them? And so you have to order all of that stuff, which costs money, and you have to wait for it to arrive. And so even to just get a job, you've got to get all this paperwork ready. And then the other side is transportation. How do we get to where we need to go when things are so spread out? It's very difficult to, without permanent transportation, without your own transportation, to really become stabilized and survive in our community.
Climbing the needs ladder is like negotiating a homeless obstacle course. It illustrates why getting out of homelessness and back to stability is so difficult, and why preventing individuals and families from falling into the river of homelessness in the first place should be one of our highest priorities. It's time we focused on upstream prevention rather than downstream rescue.